My guest today is Professor Jonathan Moreno, who's University Professor Emeritus at the University of Pennsylvania. He has published more than 1,000 papers, articles, reviews, and op-eds, and has been translated into several languages. One of his books is Impromptu Man, J.L. Moreno and the Origins of Psychodrama and Counterculture and the Social Network. Welcome, Jonathan.
Thanks so much, Gill.
Yeah, thanks so much for doing this. So I obviously know nothing about any of these topics. That makes it really interesting. The book has a lot of interesting concepts that we're going to discuss, but to set the larger context, it is a little bit about your dad also, right? J.L. Moreno?
Yes, it is. My dad was a big personality and a major contributor to social science in the 20th century, and really his ideas continue to be very influential. I often start talking about him by saying that I grew up in a mental hospital, and people have the same reaction you just did. You're probably thinking, oh yeah, my family was crazy too.
No, I wasn't thinking that because I read the first chapter at least.
All right. So you knew the punchline. So I actually did grow up in a mental hospital, as you know, from reading the first chapter, and but I do need to set the timing of all this. My father was born in 1889. I was born when he was 63 years old. So you'll be relieved to know that my mother was significantly younger by 28 years.
Yeah.
Yes.
So my mom was only 18 years old when I was born. So
no difference.
Goes another direction a little bit.
No difference.
And both have some difficulties,
Right. Well, we can probe that later on if you like.
Yes.
So my father was born in Bucharest. When he was a child, his parents moved for business reasons. The family moved to Vienna. He grew up in Vienna at a very fraught time in Vienna. It was first 20 years of the 20th century. He received his medical degree from the University of Vienna in 1917. His diploma was signed by the Emperor Franz Joseph. If that doesn't date him, I don't know what would. He was actually taken out of medical school by the Austro-Hungarian regime to work in refugee camps while he was a medical student. Many other interesting stories about those camps, as you can imagine, during World War I. When he went back to the university, apparently there wasn't very much medicine to be learned in those days because he did a lot of other things while he was in medical school. He founded a religion, which we could talk about if you like. Not usual for your podcast, I know. He also created an impromptu theater. In the course of running that theater, he had actors, and one of them was a little man named who came to be known. My father named him Peter Lorre, who anybody who watches 20th century film knows who Peter Lorre was. A great actor who was typecast as a creepy little guy, and it worked for him very well. He developed that character in my father's theater. My father also had the idea that people should play their own roles and not the roles that had been created for them by a playwright. This led him into the psychology of role playing, and ultimately to his most famous creation, which is the psychodrama. Not psychoanalysis. He was not an analyst. He rejected Freud. He was influenced by the theater. He was a man of the theater.
Yes, a man of the theater. He was also a man of science. So let's talk about psychodrama. I'm really fascinated about this, Jonathan. I know nothing about this, but it's sort of a really interesting therapeutic process, perhaps, right? So yes. Define psychodrama a little bit,
Well, my father was very, shall we say, inconsistent in his definitions, but at heart he was an Aristotelian. You remember that Aristotle's definition of catharsis, right? Wherewith to create emotions of pity and fear. So when my dad was still not even in medical school, he would go to the parks in Vienna and he noticed that the kids were playing games, mom and dad and doctor and nurse and whatever the games were, role-playing games. And it occurred to him that the natural form of therapy, of self-expression, is role-playing. So he developed that idea, thought about it more and more over the years. He was also very interested in God, particularly in Jesus. And he was although he was a Sephardic Jew, he was much more interested in Jesus than Moses. Because for Moses, God was a faraway, frightening thing, not something you could confront. But Jesus was a God with sweetness and loving, and you could actually talk to Jesus. You could encounter Jesus. And then he combined the idea of psychodrama and his fascination with the Messiah as a role-playing God. He became God in his role-playing. What would it like to play God?
Yeah, so tangentially, Jonathan, I'm really fascinated by 8 billion brains, human brains, sloshing around on a
In our
small
heads,
planet.
yeah.
And I'm actually quite surprised that we have a society, we have systems. I mean, it's all breaking down in some places, but the brain is a very complex thing. I mean, it is not really designed. Well, I mean, let me make a statement.
Careful.
It's not really designed very well because it can go in places that it was not supposed to go from a design perspective. So psychodrama is really interesting. So as you know, so I did some work in life sciences. Many of the chemical interventions that we have on the brain haven't quite worked out. I would say maybe a grand statement. And so I think psychodrama could be quite an interesting therapeutic intervention for many things. What do you think?
Well, first of all, I would say my father did not see a clear distinction between people with mental illness and the rest of us. He would have said that everyone who does not have a diagnosed mental illness is what he called a neurotic, a normal neurotic. But he was particularly interested in people with delusions. So during in the 30s and 40s and 50s, when his mental hospital north of New York City was especially active, he had many Jesus patients. He had had a very flagrant patient with Adolf Hitler during the war. He was convinced he was Hitler. And so people who had an act hunger, as he would have said, who wanted to act and wanted to fulfill their megalomaniacal fantasies, very appealing to him because he had those fantasies as well.
Right. And so the therapeutic side of this, Jonathan, so I don't quite understand this. So suppose we take a mental patient, let's call her that, and put her in a context and let her act out something. Do you think it has therapeutic effects?
Well, we can argue about how to measure this. There are, and I'm not, as you know, a psychotherapist. I don't have a particular axe to grind, as we say. But as we are speaking, as we're doing this conversation, hundreds and hundreds of people are meeting in the U.S. and in Russia in psychodrama training groups online this very weekend. So I would say that psychodrama is popular, is viewed by therapists as a useful set of techniques in therapy around the world. So all I can say is, there are certainly people who have great conviction that it is useful. So let's take an example. You might come into the psychodrama theater and there would be a chair on the stage, an empty chair. And the psychodrama director would say to the group, who is in this chair for you? Look at this chair and who at this moment is sitting in the chair. It could be a spouse, it could be a parent, could be a friend, could be a teacher. It could be somebody who is alive or somebody who's dead.
You have flexibility to imagine.
Anybody can be in the chair, exactly.
Yeah.
But who's in the chair for you? Now, I could say to you, Gill, imagine you're looking at a chair. Who would be in that chair? And then members of the group might be asked, well, who is in that chair? And they'd have different answers. And then the group would say, well, who among these other people in the group would you like to know more about?
Yeah.
One of them would be asked to volunteer to sit in the chair and be that person. So let's imagine that it's Gill's mom. And we would say, Gill, now become your mom. It's not Gill in the chair now, it's Gill's mom.
Yeah.
Hello, Mrs. What's your name? And then we'd ask her name, Betsy. Oh, Betsy, tell us something about yourself.
Right.
And as your mom, you would tell something. And then we'd say, well, now here's your son, Gill, over here. What do you think about him? How's he doing? So in this way, you begin to warm up to the role.
Yeah.
Freud had this idea of resistance. My father didn't have an idea of resistance. He said, no, it's just that we have to warm up to these roles. And gradually, in an encounter between your mom, we'd find a therapist to play your mom.
Yeah.
Based on the information we've already gleaned about her, you could work out some misunderstanding that you have, maybe some unfinished business. We all have unfinished business with our parents, whether alive or dead.
Yes. Yeah, I quite like this, Jonathan. So we are all in a little bit of a prison. I don't know what's the right term. We cannot go out. We cannot express ourselves sometimes. So the psychodrama, as your dad had portrayed it, in some ways, it's a freedom.
Yes.
It's freeing yourself to see things, right?
To be spontaneous. I mean, it sounds paradoxical, right? Be spontaneous is the commandment. But he believed that we could relearn the spontaneity we had as children, and he defined spontaneity as a novel reaction to an old situation and an adequate reaction to a new situation.
Yeah, so I don't think I ever grew up, Jonathan. So I'm always spontaneous, and that is really bad, in sort of the societal business.
It can
context.
be.
But it has some benefits in many ways, right?
Well, just in doing all the interviews that you have done for your podcast, you have to be spontaneous. You're meeting a new character, including, somebody really unusual, like me, from my background at least. So you exercise spontaneity. A good interviewer it has a lot of spontaneity, and adjusting to the subject of the interview is an exercise.
Yeah, I like it a lot. So it is sort of okay. So going back to sort of the aggregate question, I don't know if you can answer this. So we got 8 billion people. Can we put them into buckets? What percentage of them are spontaneous and otherwise?
He didn't like categorization.
Okay.
So he would have said, no, nobody is in a particular category with respect to some have it more, some have it less. But he did believe that everyone could benefit by being in a psychodrama group.
Yeah.
And that interpersonal barriers can be overcome in groups. And in fact, he believed that our personal problems could not be solved on an individual basis. This is one of the reasons he opposed psychoanalysis.
So let's talk about psychodrama a little bit. So is this a situation where 2, 3, 4 people on the stage and then a large number of people observing them?
Indeed.
How does it work? Yeah.
Yes. You could have, in principle, the whole world could be in one big psychodrama, in theory. He was very interested in the idea of psychodramatic motion pictures, for example. I think he died in 1974, so he would have been fascinated by the internet and would have really enjoyed having the whole world in one psychodrama together on the internet. Undoubtedly, many of your viewers will remember Arthur C. Clarke's 2001 Space Odyssey in the book itself, not in the film, but in the book, as the astronaut is cycling through what to watch on television beamed in from Earth, he sees, among other things, a psychodrama. So my father really believed that, there would be psychodramas perpetually somehow, but he didn't have the technology at the time to do that. But generally, you could have a psychodrama group of 30, 40, 50, 60 people with the action on the stage. But ultimately, what you want to do is ask the people in the group how they identify with the roles that are being played. So back to you. Who identifies with Gill, the son, in the psychodrama we just saw? Who identifies with Betsy, his mother? But don't analyze their relationship. This is critical. And my mother, especially, who was my father's assistant, finally inherited the work. But said, this is not psychoanalysis. We don't want you to analyze Gill and his mother in their relationship. We want to know what reminded you of Gill and of being a son or being a mother. And now it becomes a sociodrama.
Yeah.
Because cross-culturally, there are certain things about being a son or a daughter or being a mother or a father that are universal. Totally universal. And that's what makes...
that's because we all came from very few, we had a bottleneck, Homo sapiens.
Indeed.
15,000 years ago.
Indeed. So he would have wanted to think that everyone could benefit from understanding these roles that we play and to enlarge the roles by being spontaneous in these roles.
Yeah, so I'm thinking, therapeutically, Jonathan, going on a little bit of tangent here. So we have some chemicals that seem to have some interesting effects on certain disease states of the brain. I wondered, could we combine intervention by chemicals with psychodrama to improve outcomes in some way?
He was a man of his time. So there were, the first generation of neuroleptics were only becoming available as he was bringing his career to a close. The last quote unquote mental patient he had in his hospital was in the mid 1960s. So there was very little available. He did use ECT. For people with refractory depression. It wasn't his favorite, but he recognized that sometimes it was the only option. But the early drugs, as you know, had very bad side effects, or tardive dyskinesia, and he really tried to avoid them as much as he could. But he was a man of science, and he was, for a while, in one of those refugee camps in World War I. He was an anesthesiologist for a brain surgeon. Although, as you know, in the 19-teens, it didn't take much experience to be an anesthesiologist. There weren't too many options. So he would have been certainly open to new chemical interventions, but that just wasn't available to him at the time.
If he had access to it,
if he had access to them,
yeah.
Now, but even if he had, I think he still believed that ultimately we live in groups, and that we need to accommodate ourselves to the problems and the promise of living in groups.
Yeah, it's a bit like, I hate to make analogies here, Jonathan, you can correct me. It's a bit like computer science, where there's a hardware people.
Yeah, and the software people.
And they don't seem to understand each other that well. And we have the same problem in the brain regime, I think. What do you think?
It happens that, and this is not something that I shared with you before the broadcast, but this very day, I published a paper with a group in Science, in the journal Science, about cerebral organoids. And you will know very well what cerebral organoids are. This is a very promising wet lab technology
Yeah.
So one can speculate about the significance of brain organoids and what if do they have experience. We know that we know in the lab that they can assemble, that motor organoids and sensory organoids can assemble, and it'd be very provocative for experiments. A question here, and this I think goes to your wet lab, your sort of hard science, soft hardware software question is,
Yeah.
what can we learn about, for example, people with schizophrenia
Yeah.
from the brain organoids that we've derived from the cells of people with schizophrenia?
Yeah.
There's a paper that's already 7 or 8 years old that purports to show that there's some implications for psychiatry from cerebral organoids in the laboratory. So wouldn't it be fabulous? And you and I are probably in the same space on this. If we could hook up the hardware people and the software people,
Yeah.
but by means of observing these assemblages of reprogrammed neurons in the laboratory.
Hmm. So I want to go into this. So another topic, a larger topic, is invitation to an encounter or encounter more generally.
Yeah.
And your dad had a quote here in 1914, which I find really fascinating. A meeting of two, eye to eye, face to face, and when you are near, I will tear your eyes out and place them instead of mine, and you will tear my eyes out and will place them instead of yours. Then I will look at you with your eyes, and you will look at me with mine. Yeah, that's it's very.
It's a powerful image.
It's a powerful image, and if you can really do that, I think the world will be a better place. Actually, in some
Well,
ways. But
this leads me to the other technique that I should mention in
yeah,
the psychodrama.
yeah,
We talked about the empty chair and the auxiliary ego, putting you and you in your mother's chair, or some therapist in your mother's chair, and having an interaction with you.
yeah,
The other technique that this calls to mind is what's called role reversal. So we ask Gill
yeah,
to be his mom, which sort of mentioned before. And then
yeah.
if we could bring your mom into the theater, let's see how well your mom could play your role.
Yes.
Um, he did not believe that we were limited by our persona or temperament or personality.
Yeah.
Yes, we are, as you've said, sort of trapped in our skulls in one sense, but he believed it is possible to transcend.
Yeah. So early 1900, um, we didn't have a lot of, I would argue, science, at least sort of pharmaceutical science.
Right.
Um, and he actually appears, from my naive perspective, push the field forward to think about therapeutic effects of things, right?
Yeah, I mean he saw what we've been talking about as a kind of as a natural form of psychotherapy. But he was also, as I said, a man of science. So at the same time that while he was in medical school, he was assigned to a clinic uh, in Vienna, and the clinic to which he was assigned happened to be directed by Julius Wagner Jarisch. Julius Wagner von Jarisch, who was the person who developed what's called malaria therapy, which may ring a bell with you.
Yeah,
For
yeah, for
people
sure.
for
Yeah.
people who were had tertiary syphilis, and it's really weird to think, but he
Mm,
was giving mental patients with people with syphilis,
mm,
with psychotic disorders from syphilis, malaria, which managed the disease for a limited amount of time.
yeah.
But it did get him. It won him the Nobel Prize in 1927 for
Mm,
malaria therapy.
mm,
And of course, history of psychiatry is full of shock therapies, and in a way, this is a kind of a chemical shock therapy, you might say.
yeah.
Um, so he was also very relieved, as he said in his own memoir, that he didn't have to do any of these experiments on helpless mental patients. Um, so
Yeah.
he certainly was exposed to brain chemistry.
Yeah.
But he would
Yeah,
not have thought that brain chemistry itself was the total solution to our problems.
right. Yeah. It's interesting. Interesting, Jonathan. So, um, more recently, we've been trying to use virus to wake the brain up.
Yeah,
So when you have bad brain cancers
yeah,
and the immune system is sleeping, um, we could introduce a virus to get the brain wake up, so to speak, or the immune system to wake up
yeah.
to kill the virus. So it's largely in the same avenue, you know.
Indeed.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
yeah,
To use the system's own capacity to defend itself against the invasive entity. Yeah.
yeah.
But again, it wouldn't have been enough for him. He believed that you had to have some kind of social intervention, ultimately.
A social intervention. Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit about your background. So you say here, I grew up in a mental hospital. I sometimes have groups of students or colleagues when I'm giving a talk that I notice amused smiles and nods in the room. I can tell what they're thinking. Um, but you had a very distinct experience. You were forced to live in a mental hospital.
Had no choice.
You had no choice. And how has that been? I mean, what have you learned from that?
Well, in my case, I'm 73, so I've had a lot of
Yeah,
time to think about this and
yeah,
become, whatever it is I am. Um, uh, I believe that there is wiring and that we are hardwired, and we'll say this based on my own experience. Um, I was never uh, I had never thought by the time I became a teenager, certainly in my teen years, I never thought that I would become a psychotherapist. It wasn't for me.
mm,
Uh, but I was an observer, and I think, at an early age, I was a reasonably acute observer. And probably by the time I was 12 or 13, I realized that I was in a unique situation.
mm,
If you remember now, this is the early 1960s when
yeah,
there's a shift in the West, certainly in much of the West, at least, certainly in America and Western Europe, coming out of the war era and into something new, a very prosperous period in the West, the affluent society. And people were looking for other options, right? So the 1960s, we have all the liberation movements, particularly in the West, and the student movement and reactions to Vietnam, uh, drug experiences, and so forth.
mm,
Um, and I was exposed to many people who were part of those movements just because my father was such an interesting figure to these people.
mm,
Um, I missed some of it, I think, in the 1950s. He was really famous in the 50s.
yeah,
By the early 1960s, he was getting older, and in some respects, I think he was losing touch with the culture as it was changing, and he knew it.
mm,
Um, but I met all sorts of odd folks, psychiatrists and scientists, and
mm,
clergy and spiritual seekers,
mm,
actors, and famous social scientists. Um, so, for me, it was a terrific opportunity to observe. I wish I had, taken notes when I was 12 years old. It would have been a little weird. Um, but, there were some really interesting times. In 1959, we went to Moscow. There were very few American scientists going to Soviet Union in the 1950s.
mm,
My father was acceptable to the Soviet communists because he was not a Freudian.
yeah,
Um, and we returned in 1966, and he was quite famous, particularly for his interest in group dynamics and what
yeah,
we haven't talked about yet, which is a social network analysis.
yeah. So we'll go into that. So I just want to finish up on this. So Freud, um, if I understand this correctly, Jonathan, he was I don't know. I mean, he was very systematic into making his legacy or whatever you want to call it.
Indeed,
Whereas your dad, probably more
he,
interested in science. Real
he was
science.
not. My dad
Yeah.
was not systematic.
Okay.
He really, in terms of building his legacy. I mean, he could have been more organized in some respects. He could have been more cautious in the use of language. But Freud was much more, as you say, I think the best word is systematic. As we know, he had people in many countries who represented him, who he had his chosen disciples and so forth. The other thing about Freud is, well, he had an encounter. My father had an encounter with Freud that I should perhaps mention. It's a classic story. Around 1912, 1913, he was. My father was in a lecture hall, and Freud was giving a lecture about a dream analysis. And afterwards, the young men, presumably all men, were lined up, and Freud went down the row and had a conversation briefly with each of them. And he got to my father and said, "What is your names?" "Well, my name is Moreno." And said, "Well, Moreno, what are you doing?" And my father said, "Well, Professor Freud, I begin where you leave off." "What do you mean?" "You destroy people's dreams by analyzing them. I give them the courage to dream
That's
again."
Powerful, yeah.
"I give them the courage to dream again. Professor Freud, I wish you luck."
Yeah, so Freud was, if I understand this correctly, more of a diagnostician.
He never cured anybody. Let's be frank.
He loves to diagnose and then leave the patients behind.
Yeah.
Your dad was more therapeutic.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And I think that probably even the psychoanalysts wouldn't disagree with that. Psychoanalysis is a very intellectual activity. Psychodrama is a very, you might say, gut level activity. It has to be because of the nature of catharsis.
Yeah. So I was just reading through one paragraph here on the encounter culture that we want to talk about. So you say here, as I read widely for this book, I discovered a remarkable passage in a 1982 history in improvisational theater of the distinguished University of California theater historian Robert Carlos. In one dense paragraph, the Hungarian-born Robert Sarlos. So Sarlos dispatched a series of observations that sketch a good part of the argument of this book, mentioning theater, therapy, and the group dynamics, ideas that form the basis of a social network. So we want to talk a little bit about social network. This has been sort of cooking.
Yes.
I should say about 150 years now, right? And
Indeed.
Talk a little bit about that.
Well, he was, as I mentioned, a medic in a couple of refugee camps, and one of them he noticed that people who were coming from the east, this is during the First World War, were being placed arbitrarily in living quarters, and it was a big problem. They spoke different languages, they had different cultures. Even if perhaps they were all Christians, but they still had different approaches to their religion. And he said, why are we doing it this way? Why don't we let people decide with whom they want to live?
Yeah.
And how do we determine that? Well, through choice. There are social networks that are implicit in our backgrounds and our relationships. But he didn't really get to do any experiments with the idea of a social network until he came to the United States. And in 1930, 31, he was asked by people who ran big institutions to come in and help them sort out their problems. And then he realized that you could make a map of their relationships, which he called a sociogram, which today we call social graphics.
Yeah.
And all of the social media companies now, LinkedIn, Facebook, and so forth, they're all based on this idea of a social network. And they have their own graphic interactions. Even, as you well know, the intelligence community, right, has social networks based on who's talking to whom on their cell phone or who's communicating on text. So the idea of the network, the social network, I think is one of the great ideas that historians of science have kind of missed that is so critical in the modern world.
It's so critical. But I see sort of an inverted U curve here. Let me get your perspective on this. social networks are, I mean, we've been social animals forever, Homo sapiens. And so we have known social networks
Yeah.
from the beginning. Then social networks scaled with technology. It's a little bit unclear to me. I want to get your perspective on this. It's a little bit unclear to me that highly scaled up social networks are the same networks that Homo sapiens were using before. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, we clearly did not evolve to have conversations through the technology that you and I are using at this very moment. Uh, and yet, you know, we are a pretty adaptive species.
Yeah,
Uh, so, it is remarkable to think about how rapidly uh, the World Wide Web, building on the internet, has changed the way we interact. Not in all good ways,
yeah,
by any means. Um, so, we are now faced with this question: how do we humanize the way that we use the technology of social networks? And it's not a question that my dad had to face.
yeah.
But it is maybe it is the driving problem of the species going forward. Maybe this is the biggest problem we face.
Yeah, yeah, sort of. Yeah, could be the biggest problem, as you say, that we face. Uh, it's a little bit unsettling to think about social networks as the foundational technology that's
Mm,
scaling. For me, what is scaling is not necessarily social networks. Social networks, in your dad's time, was physical networks.
right.
It is people talking to each other,
Yeah.
networks. What we have now, we don't really know who the other person is on the other side of
Yeah.
this electronic channel, right?
Right. No, it is a deep problem. Um, we have in many ways withdrawn from group experiences unless you're going to a cricket match or a football game or something. We
Yes.
um, and obviously the way that people find each other to become partners now is through these platforms.
Yeah.
People don't seem to go to bars anymore to meet people, as far as I can tell, right?
Yeah.
Uh, Mostly, some do, but many don't.
Right.
Um, and if people aren't going to the office, and many people are not going to the office, right? You're not meeting people through your business necessarily either.
The
Uh,
companies are trying to bring them back.
P
I understand.
companies are with mixed success, is my impression, but
Mixed success. Yeah, for
um,
sure. Yeah.
because people have become accustomed to these arrangements in which you only go to the office once or twice a week. I know people, I'm sure you do as well, who go maybe once a month or once a year
Mm.
to meet people in their company. So
Yeah.
this is, I have wondered
Hmm.
if at some point there will be a reaction to this isolation and people will once again insist on getting into the kinds of groups that we had, even in sensitivity groups,
Yeah.
encounter groups, quasi-therapeutic groups in the 1960s and 1970s when they were so popular. I wonder if that will happen again. Uh,
Yeah. That's a really interesting question. So, I mean, humans don't like isolation. I mean, we can get data on this.
right.
Um, but humans are different. Some humans like, I don't know, a network of 10. Some would like a network of 10,000.
Yeah.
I have to say I'm in the latter category personally.
You have a big
Uh,
so you have a big amplitude. You have a big social amplitude.
I
You like
I
lots
don't
of
know. I
people.
mean,
Yeah.
it just the way that I think about things, right? So every human is different, but they all need a network, a
Yeah.
social network.
Yeah.
If you don't have that, I think so. This goes into the psychology things that we discussed. If you don't have a network, you have some sort of psychological, let me make a grand statement, let me react to it, a psycho disease of some sort, right? I mean, humans are networking people fundamentally.
Yeah, I mean, what comes to mind is the association of dementia as people get older with isolation, and it's not clear exactly, how this works, right? But
Yeah.
it does seem to be the case that people who have some level of engagement with family and friends, I mean, in-person engagement,
Yeah.
uh, do better as they get older cognitively. And that seems to make perfect sense, right? Because we did evolve in very intimate circumstances with other members of our species. So,
Yeah.
um, uh, how can we overcome this kind of separation imposed by conditions like the pandemic? Uh, I think that we have not sorted this out yet.
We have sorted it out, but it's getting worse, Jonathan. I'll argue that. So we have this AI thing going on. I'm going a little bit of a tangent here. Um, the AI thing says you don't have to talk to a human, you just
Yeah,
talk to a computer.
yeah,
And that is actually much more potent issue compared to the pandemic, I
yeah.
think. I don't know where we're going to end up on this, but I just post this. Yeah.
I think that's one of the questions of the hour is a chatbot that is a therapeutic chatbot, and there's a lot of writing about this now, as you know. What are the implications of this? They do seem to be helpful to some people who are having acute problems.
Yeah.
But um, nonetheless, it seems to me we still do need somehow to be in person and physically present to fulfill. I'm going to use an old 1960s to actualize ourselves as Maslow, as Abraham Maslow said.
Yeah.
Um, I do, and this is not a scientific assertion, but it just seems to me we lose something in this setting. There's a failure to enlarge ourselves unless we are actually with people and challenged by physical presence.
Yeah.
So we
Right.
don't know, I don't know that you're younger than I am. Maybe you'll live to see the way this turns out. I'm not sure I will.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah. I'm not
but
that young. Yeah.
it's a question. Well, you look at, so that's half the battle. You're raising a very serious
Yeah.
and worrying question. Um, and it's tied in with so much of our global political de-alignment and deglobalization, it seems to me.
Yeah. So, so let me get your perspective on this. So, there's also skills loss. So, if we go back, think about your dad, early 1900s, we were thinking about people mostly and therapeutic effects and helping people, those types of things.
Yeah,
We don't think about people anymore. It is like how big is a silicon thing is,
yeah,
and how big is a data center is. And so we have fundamentally changed Homo sapien brains. I don't know if it's good or bad. I mean, I cannot predict the future,
yeah.
but it has some drastic yeah, effects on society, I would argue. Yeah.
I mean, it does. What you're putting me in mind of is the notion of existential risk, and you know, it, it, as you know, there's a literature about this, right? To what extent are we um, putting ourselves at risk as a species, as a civilization, to the extent we can be said to be civilized, uh, by various factors, from nuclear weapons to climate change. But also, I think this problem of re-socializing ourselves after a global pandemic
Hmm.
and there have been pandemics before, as we well know, but the um,
Hmm.
the awareness of what's going on around us because of the web
Yeah.
made this pandemic quite different from, say, the bubonic plague.
Yeah.
So,
Just, yeah.
do we get off the planet?
Mhm.
And if we don't, is this step toward depersonalizing interpersonal relations a reason that we don't? And we have, some of the most affluent societies
Yeah.
we're not replacing ourselves, right? There are, I
Yeah.
mean, the Japanese are incredible technologists,
Yeah.
but they have a birth deficit, and this is
Very
very,
bad. Very
very
bad.
bad.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So let's touch on the pandemic a little bit. I don't know if it's part of your book, but you mentioned it. So um, there have been different policies by different countries during the pandemic. I believe Sweden was very sort of, yeah, don't take the vaccines, go with your ways type. We were very stringent in our policy prescriptions,
yeah. When you
and
say we,
yeah, the US, I mean, yeah.
U.S., yeah,
And so in exposed, it's very unclear, a very stringent policy that sort of divided people into buckets and kept them there
yeah.
is any more beneficial than somebody saying, yeah, I mean, just go and do what you want to do. It's unclear to me. What do you think about? I mean, I know I'm going on a tangent, but I just want to get your
No, no,
perspective.
it's not a tangent at all. It's of
Yeah,
great interest to me, and
yeah,
in fact, the book I most recently published, called Absolutely Essential,
yeah,
gets us into this territory. This you mentioned the Swedish case. So the Swedish case and the Danish cases are very interesting because the
yeah,
Swedes didn't lock down right the first
yeah,
year. The Danes did. The Swedes had a pretty high mortality rate,
yeah,
and but they kept functioning economically better than some other countries did.
yeah,
These comparisons are really hard to make because of all the variables, right?
yeah,
All the demographics are so different.
yeah,
Um, here's what concerns me though. This is at a meta level.
yeah.
Uh, this country, the United States, is not doing a look back to see how
We're not learning. We're
we
not
are not.
learning.
We have exactly. So as you may know, I worked for 3 presidential commissions. In
Yeah,
2020, I thought, well, no matter what happens with this damn thing, in a few years there will be a presidential commission,
yeah,
to look back and see what we did, how we did it, what worked, what didn't. The UK I heard 2 weeks ago, the UK is spending £200 million to do a comprehensive review of how
well,
it
yeah.
functioned in response. I'm
We
sure
abs-
many other countries are
we
doing it,
absolutely have to do it. We have
but
to do
we are not doing it because
it.
of the breakdown of trust in our political system. That's clearly why we're not doing it.
Yeah, yeah,
So, as we speak, this moment we're talking, I'm supposed to go to a meeting in California next week. It's not clear I can fly out there. So, so we have really broken down in so many ways.
yeah,
Um, so I'm saying this is a meta level. We haven't learned. We have not been in the position to look back at this. Maybe it'll take another 5 years, maybe another 10 years.
yeah,
But this is what I think worries me uh, a great deal right now going forward about not
yeah.
systematically reviewing the experience
Hmm.
because our divisions are so profound.
Yeah. We haven't learned, and we are not even trying to learn.
We're not trying to learn.
And it is just a matter of time. A bigger event is going to happen.
Sure.
Um, I don't think we have any controls over that.
Yeah.
And so yeah, so what you're saying is that, I mean, if you really learn the processes, the risks and the returns of our actions, we could get better. But I don't I don't think we are in a position
It,
to get
it,
better.
it
Yeah.
doesn't look hopeful at the moment, but this is tied into the bigger problem, and I talk about it in my more recent book,
Yeah.
uh, about the collapse of the rules-based international order over the last 80 years.
Yeah.
And I don't understand the argument for undermining something like the World Health Organization. If we didn't have one, we'd have to create one, and we will have to create another one if we undermine this one. Not to mention organizations like Gavi that have been distributing vaccines or arranging for the local distribution of vaccines. So
Yeah.
um, this makes no sense to me. So I think we're now in a kind of interregnum, and in our global political system, and public health is very much at risk.
Hmm.
As long as there is so much mistrust, and as long as the U.S. is not leading, and we are not leading.
We're not leading anymore. So I know that you have to go. So I want to touch on, I haven't read this, Jonathan, but the bioethics question. We have a lot of research going on. I would characterize as sort of disintegrated research. I mean, it is happening in universities, happening in pharmaceutical companies, it's
Yeah.
happening in developing world and developed world. So, what is your general sense of policy from a bioethics perspective?
So the global system the last 80 years has been very good for science. You just pick up any copy of any of the big one word journals in science. You see so many collaborators from different parts of the world, including in particular the US and China.
Yeah.
According to one criterion, which is the number of peer-reviewed publications by Chinese scientists, China has, in the last few months, surpassed the US in knowledge production. You may know this.
Yeah.
So that was predicted. I reviewed these predictions 15 years ago for a previous book called The Body Politic, and people saw it coming. I know people will say, oh, but that's many of those China journals are junk journals. I'm not talking about those journals. I'm talking about Nature and Science and Cell and the big ones. Um, and I'm not denying that there is a problem with intellectual property theft. I'm not denying that China has
It's a
created
big problem.
opportunities.
Yeah.
It's a problem.
Yeah.
The theft is a problem. And it's a kind of espionage, I guess you could say, industrial espionage. China has a different. I've been there 4 times, talking to scientists at China since 2006, I think the first time, most recently in 2019, and they do have a different approach to knowledge development than we do. And
Yeah.
as we know, the corporate and the ideological relationships and the military relationships are very different.
Yeah.
Nonetheless, it's hard for me to imagine us disentangling ultimately from China, us being the U.S.
Yeah.
Just the scale of trade that we do, despite all this tariff business, the scale of trade is so immense. We need each other to keep our economies afloat.
Yeah. So the war, the iconic war image
Yeah.
of planes dropping bombs is so archaic. The
So
real
archaic.
war is in the info. It's the information war.
Yeah, it
Um,
is.
yeah, and so the policy questions have to really focus on that. And I don't know much about China, but it's not a democracy, and so it's very difficult to collaborate with an autocracy, I would say. I mean, we make a statement, let you react to it. We are potentially not a democracy either, or very close to not being a democracy. But if we are really a democracy, then it's very difficult to deal with autocratic regimes, I think, right?
I mean, there's a longstanding doctrine among political scientists in the West, at least, that the best guarantor of peaceful interaction between sovereign states is liberal democracy. That liberal democracies tend not to go to war with each other.
Yeah,
Let's not test that theory.
it's expensive.
It's expensive,
Yeah.
right? Um, Arthur Schlesinger, the historian and a sometime diplomat said, every war is popular for the first 30 days.
Yes. Yeah.
So yeah, it is expensive at many levels. And it must be said of our own country that the founders did not design a democracy. They designed a constitutional republic with democratic elements
Right.
and some very undemocratic elements, because they were cynics about what used to be called human nature, probably more cynical than you and I are. So there are these undemocratic elements are causing us a big problem at the moment. Now, on the bright side, you and I are doing this podcast, and we don't think that the Stasi are going to come to knock on our door tomorrow morning.
We don't know that yet, Jonathan.
So far, they've not come to our door.
Yeah.
But I mean, I heard a senator years ago said he was doing his gardening in front of his house.
Yes.
And a guy pulled up in a car and cursed him out.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And he said, that's okay. The guy drove
You
away.
get some information.
The senator said, okay, I got to hear that guy. He didn't like my views. But I also know that guy, I cannot, as a U.S. senator, order a policeman to go to his door and arrest him tomorrow for yelling at me from his car.
That's just a matter of time, though.
We have to somehow we have to stick to the guns, metaphorically speaking, because look, 250 years is a pretty good run for a republic. So
yes.
let's sustain it somehow. You're an immigrant. My parents are both immigrants.
Yeah.
They valued the system, and they knew it was like not to have such a system.
Yeah. So my optimism is based on that there's too many good people in the 330 million people that we have. We are not going to break the I don't know what the right term is, but we are not going to break it, I think. I mean, we got just too many good people in the country, I think.
Yeah, I think much damage is being done, but our system is it's hard to get your arms around all 50 states and the District of Columbia and the territories. I mean, it's a complicated sovereign state. So it's not Hungary, and we don't have the homogeneity of China or India or Pakistan, where I've also spent time.
India is not homogeneous, by the way. India is like us, very much.
The different states and the different languages.
26 different states.
Well taken.
Languages and everything. Yeah.
I should know that because I have a couple of half Indian nephew and niece. I should know this. So we have to. And by the way, this is I think aided India in its democracy as complicated as it is.
Yeah.
And the current regime would like it to be a little less democratic and a little less heterogeneous.
I think it's going to fail. I think India is doing reasonably okay, I think. I don't think democracy is going to fail there. But I do worry if democracy could fail us in the US. I have nightmares about this, but hopefully that's not the case. Yeah.
Well, it's not written in stone.
Yes.
Universal human equality is not written in stone either.
Yeah.
It's something we have to keep working on.
You have to keep working on it.
And by the way, science is inherently progressive and enlightening.
Yeah.
Which is a reason that people find science very annoying.
Yes.
Right? Because it conflicts with our biases and our prejudices.
Yes. So the guy who has the biggest show on Spotify has 100 million listeners, and I have 10,000.
Well, that's a lot more than I have.
And so, yeah, that's not going to change much.
We don't know. We don't know. I'm supporting you. I'm on your side.
Excellent, Jonathan. Yeah, I know that you have to go to dinner. So excellent. Yeah, thanks so much for spending time with me.
I enjoyed it, Gil. Thank you. Cheers.